Story 1. The Clearing in the Woods. If you're from Cleveland, you know the specific kind of heartbreak that comes with being a Browns fan. This happened on New Year's Eve, 2017. I had just flown home after finishing a semester at the University of Rochester. I was already in a foul mood because I had stayed at school an extra week for personal reasons, missing Christmas with my family. And to top it off, I watched from the airport bar as the Browns lost their final game to go 0-16. A perfect, winless season. My flight was delayed, which threw a wrench in my family's plans. We were supposed to caravan to my cousin's house for a New Year's Eve party, but my parents decided to leave early in the main car to beat the weather. That left me to drive the spare car alone. My mom, trying to be sweet, left our golden retriever, Vera, behind to keep me company. I landed around 10 p.m., threw my bags in the car, loaded up Vera, and hit the road. The drive was nothing special, just miles of winding Ohio back roads cutting through empty fields and patches of forest. There was a light dusting of snow on the ground, but it was pitch black outside. The only light came from my high beams and the occasional farmhouse glowing in the distance. About halfway through the trip, Vera started acting up. She was whining and pacing in the passenger seat. I knew the signs. She needed to go out. I groaned, not wanting to stop in the freezing cold, but I didn't have a choice. I found a small clearing on the side of the road, barely big enough for the car, and pulled over. It was terrifyingly dark. If not for the snow reflecting the moonlight, the woods would have been a black void. I let Vera out without a leash. She was a good dog and never wandered far. She sniffed around the tree line while I stood by the car, shivering, hands jammed in my pockets, waiting for her to finish. That's when I heard it. Crash! A loud, heavy sound echoed from the woods. It wasn't a squirrel or a branch snapping in the wind. It sounded like a grown man sprinting through the underbrush, smashing through everything in his path. I jumped, my heart hammering against my ribs. I squinted into the darkness, but I couldn't see past the first row of trees. Then, my worst nightmare happened. Vera bolted. She didn't run away from the noise. She ran toward it. She took off into the trees and vanished into the dark. "Vera!" I screamed. "Vera, no!" She didn't come back. Panic took over. I couldn't leave her. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and ran blindly into the woods. The light was dim, barely cutting through the shadows, and I was slipping on the snow-covered leaves, practically running into trees. I ran until my lungs burned from the cold air. I stopped to catch my breath, leaning against an oak tree on the verge of a breakdown. The silence of the woods felt heavy, oppressive. Then, I saw her. Vera was walking slowly toward me out of the shadows, but she looked wrong. She was crouched low to the ground, shivering violently, with her tail tucked completely between her legs. I had never seen her look so terrified. I dropped to my knees and hugged her, feeling her entire body trembling against mine. Whatever she had seen out there had scared her to death. That's when reality hit me. We were still in the woods, and whatever scared her was still out there. "Come on, girl," I whispered. "Let's go." We started walking back toward the road. I was praying I was heading in the right direction. Suddenly, a crashing sound erupted behind us. Crash! 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 It wasn't random noise anymore. It was rhythmic. Footsteps. Someone was chasing us. I didn't look back. I sprinted. Vera was right beside me, matching my pace. The crashing sounds got louder, closer, like the person was gaining on us. I have never felt fear like that in my life, I genuinely thought I was going to die in those woods. We burst out of the tree line and saw the car. I threw the passenger door open, practically shoved Vera inside, and slammed it shut. As I ran around to the driver's side, I made the mistake of looking back at the woods. Standing at the edge of the tree line, illuminated by my taillights, were 3 figures. They were just standing there, motionless, watching us. I jumped in, locked the doors, and peeled out of there, tires spinning on the gravel. I drove like a maniac for miles, my hands shaking so hard I could barely steer. It wasn't until I was safely down the road that I looked over at Vera. My stomach dropped. There was blood on her fur. I pulled over under a street lamp and checked her. There was a clean slice just below her shoulder blade. It wasn't a scratch from a branch. It was a cut. Someone had stabbed her. My mom's obsession with being prepared finally paid off. There was a first aid kit in the trunk. I cleaned the wound and wrapped it in gauze while Vera whimpered. I never told my family what happened. I just said she scratched herself on a fence. But I know the truth. Those figures weren't just watching us. They were hunting us. And if Vera hadn't run back to me when she did, I don't think either of us would have made it out of those woods. Story 2. The Snowplow. This happened a few years ago, on New Year's Eve. While most people were getting ready for parties, I was driving alone to my parents' house in upstate Pennsylvania. I've always been the type of person who enjoys long solo drives. It gives me time to think, so I wasn't dreading the trip. I left in the late afternoon, figuring I had plenty of time to beat the darkness and the weather. I was wrong. About an hour into the drive, the sky turned a flat, ominous grey, and the snow started. At first, it was just light flurries, nothing my little sedan couldn't handle. But I think I jinxed myself by thinking it was pretty. Within 30 minutes, I was in the middle of a full-blown blizzard. The highway became a sheet of ice, and visibility dropped to near zero. My tires started slipping on even the slightest inclines, and I realized I was risking my life by trying to push through. I pulled onto the shoulder, parking far enough off the road to avoid getting sideswiped by passing traffic. Not that there was any. I texted my parents to let them know I was stuck. They were worried sick, and my dad offered to come get me, but I told him it was a death wish to drive in this. I told them I'd wait it out, and if it didn't let up, I'd call the police. I didn't have AAA, and I really didn't want to call 911 unless I had to. So, I sat there. Hours passed. The snow just kept piling up, burying my car. I was turning the engine on and off in intervals to conserve gas and battery, trying to keep the heat going without killing the car. The wind was howling outside, shaking the frame. The isolation was starting to get to me. Then, a miracle happened. Headlights cut through the whiteout behind me. A massive snowplow pulled up alongside my car. I literally wanted to jump for joy. I rolled down my window as the driver leaned out of his. He was an older guy, maybe late 50s, wearing a thick jacket and a black knit hat pulled low over his ears. His face was deeply wrinkled and weathered, like leather that had been left out in the sun too long. I expected him to shout, "Need help?" But he didn't. He just stared at me. For an uncomfortable amount of time, he just looked at me through the falling snow. Finally, he spoke. "You okay?" His voice was gruff, the kind of voice you get from smoking a pack a day for 40 years. "I don't think my car can handle this," I said, trying to be friendly, but feeling a weird prickle of unease. He nodded slowly. "You won't get far in a storm like this. Not in that car." He paused, his eyes scanning my back seat as if he were looking for someone, or something. Then he made the offer. I can give you a ride. I hesitated. I didn't know this guy, and he gave off a weird vibe. But staying in my car all night in freezing temperatures was dangerous. I asked if he could take me to my parents' address. No problem, he said. What about my car? I asked. He shrugged, his expression flat. Leave it. Against my gut instinct, I grabbed my bag and climbed up into the high cab of the plow. The warmth hit me instantly, and I relaxed a little. I gave him the directions, and we started moving. But the relief didn't last long. As we drove, the silence in the cab became suffocating. I glanced at the GPS on my phone and felt my stomach drop. We weren't heading toward my parents' house. We were driving in the complete opposite direction. Are we going the right way? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't look at me. Taking a detour. Back roads are better than the highway. That was a lie. In a storm like this, the highway is the only thing that gets plowed. Back roads are a death trap. My paranoia spiked, and I started actually looking around the cab. That's when I saw the red flags I had missed in my desperation to get warm. Rolling around on the floor near his feet were empty liquor bottles. Stuffed into the side pockets were torn-up maps. And then I saw it. Wedged between the seats, just inches from his hand, was a knife. My heart started pounding so hard I thought he could hear it. The GPS kept recalibrating because he was missing every turn, driving us deeper into nowhere. Through the swirling snow, I spotted a farmhouse in the distance. It was the only light I had seen for miles. I knew this was my only chance. I didn't think. I waited until he slowed down for a bend, grabbed the door handle, and kicked the door open with everything I had. The cold air slapped me in the face. I jumped. I hit the snowy ground hard, pain flaring up my leg, but I scrambled to my feet instantly. The man shouted something angry. I glanced back and saw him fumbling with the glove box. I didn't wait to see if he was grabbing a gun. I sprinted through the deep snow toward the house, screaming for help. A couple answered the door and pulled me inside before I even finished my sentence. I collapsed on their floor, hysterical. They called the police immediately. By the time the cops arrived, the snowplow was gone. They searched the area, but in a blizzard like that, tracks disappear in minutes. The police ended up driving me the rest of the way to my parents' house. My dad was furious, and I haven't driven in the snow since. I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't seen that house. I don't think that detour was ever going to end. Story 3. The Trap on the Ice. I've never been the type for crowded parties or countdowns in Times Square. I grew up in northwestern Ontario, where winter isn't just a season, it's a lifestyle. Since I was a kid, my New Year's Eve tradition was simple. Ice fishing. It started with my dad and his buddies, huddled on a frozen lake in the dead of night, while the rest of the world drank champagne. My dad is gone now, and my brother moved to Chicago, but I kept the tradition alive. A couple of years ago, it was just me and my two best friends, Nate and Trevor. We fit the stereotype. Burly, bearded guys who were more comfortable in a forest than a club. We weren't scared of the dark or the cold. Or at least, we didn't think we were. Nate drove. He had this beast of a truck, lifted, four-wheel drive, big tires, perfect for navigating the unplowed back roads. We loaded the bed with everything: augers, rods, tip-ups, a sled, and a pop-up shelter to keep the wind off us. We were heading to a secret spot, a small, nameless lake tucked deep in the woods. It wasn't on any map, and the ice there froze thick and solid early in the season. It was the kind of place you only find if you know exactly where to look. We pulled up to the trailhead around 10 p.m. The silence was absolute, broken only by the crunch of snow under Nate's tires. As we parked, I noticed a figure standing near the edge of the woods. It was a man, bundled up in heavy winter gear, standing perfectly still about 20 yards away. He wasn't fishing. He wasn't setting up gear. He was just watching us. "Heads up," I muttered to the guys. "That guy's creeping me out." Trevor shrugged it off, but I kept my eyes on him. The man looked down at his phone, the screen lighting up his face for a second, then looked back at us, then back at his phone. It felt coordinated. It felt wrong. Before we could even unload the sled, the man sprinted toward the truck. He was waving his arms frantically. I rolled down the window, ready for a confrontation. "Help! You gotta help!" he screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "My buddy fell through the ice! He's going under!" He pointed at his phone. "The other guy just texted me. We have to go, now!" Adrenaline overrides logic every time. We didn't think. We didn't grab our coats or our gear. Trevor threw his door open, and the three of us bolted out of the truck, following the man as he took off down the narrow trail toward the lake. We were jogging to keep up with him. He was fast. But as we neared the shoreline, a warning bell went off in my head. He wasn't leading us toward the main body of the lake, where the ice was safest. He was leading us toward a remote, marshy cove, where the ice was usually thin and dangerous. "Hey, wait!" I yelled. It was too late. We burst into a small clearing by the water. There was no hole in the ice. There was no drowning friend. Waiting for us were two other men. They were standing still, dressed in dark clothes, watching us arrive. And they weren't holding fishing rods. They were holding guns. My blood froze. The man who had led us there turned around, the panic vanishing from his face, replaced by a cold smirk. "Stop right there!" one of the gunmen yelled, raising his pistol and pointing it directly at my chest. I cannot describe the feeling of looking down the barrel of a gun in the middle of nowhere. It is a primal, suffocating terror. "Keys," the second gunman demanded. "Phones, wallets, now!" We had walked right into an ambush. Nate reached into his pocket and tossed his truck keys to the first man. We emptied our pockets. I handed over my wallet and my phone. When they got to Nate, they asked for his phone. "It's in the truck," Nate said, his voice steady. The gunman laughed, seemingly satisfied with the hold. They forced us to walk back up the trail at gunpoint. When we reached the parking area, one of the men jumped into Nate's truck and sped off. The other two backed away into the woods, presumably to their own vehicle, hidden nearby. We were left standing in the freezing cold, miles from civilization, with nothing. We stood there shivering for a minute, waiting for the sound of another engine to fade. Then, Nate reached into his boot and pulled out his phone. He had lied. I have never been so relieved in my life. We somehow still had a bar of service. Nate called 911, explaining the situation in a calm, flat voice. The police told us to stay put. We huddled together for warmth, the anger starting to set in. Nate was furious, kicking trees and screaming into the dark, but there was nothing we could do. The cops eventually arrived and drove us back to Trevor's house. They took a report, but they were honest with us. The chances of finding the truck or the men were slim to none. They were right. Nate's truck was never found. To this day, we don't know if it was a targeted hit or just bad luck. Trevor thinks we just stumbled into the wrong people at the wrong time. But I can't shake the feeling that they were waiting for us. Who stands in a frozen parking lot on New Year's Eve on the off chance that someone shows up? I still go fishing, but I don't go to that lake anymore. And I don't stop for strangers.